So, of course, we're going to talk about it today. I mean, how can we not? 31 members of the white nationalist hate group Patriot Front were arrested over the weekend in Coeur d'Alene. They were there to start a riot during a pride event. A Coeur d'Alene resident apparently saw what they described as a small army. Lots of people dressed the same with arm patches and logos on their hats, climbing into the back of a rented U-Haul van parked in a hotel parking lot. Well, after getting that tip, Coeur d'Alene police stopped the van about a quarter mile from their destination, McEwen Park. The same place there happened to be a pride event happening. Well, they slid open the back of the van very carefully and, well, outspilled the contents. More than 24. And those arrested came from 13 states, from as far away as Texas and Arkansas and Alabama, and from as nearby as Washington and Wyoming and Oregon and Utah and, yes, Idaho. 2 of them that we know about were from Idaho. 21-year-old Winston Worth Durham of Genesee, 21-year-old Richard Jacob Jessup of Idaho Falls there in the center. Then also in that U-Haul van, the apparent leader of Patriot Front. That'd be Thomas Ryan Rousseau, all of 23 years old. Patriot Front, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, is a white nationalist hate group with its origins in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in 2017. Remember that? Remember the tiki torch marching, the Jews will not replace us chanting? The gathering which ended with a man driving a car into a group of counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer. The Anti-Defamation League says Patriot Front is a white supremacist group who believes America belongs to them and them only, as in white European lineage. To them, patriotism means white supremacy, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and fascism. So that's the kind of ilk we're talking about in North Idaho. All 31 bailed out of jail and face misdemeanor charges of conspiring to riot. Coeur d'Alene Chief of Police Lee White reiterated today what he said after the arrests. Saturday would have been a much different day if it weren't for that one phone call.
One concerned citizen can prevent something horrible from happening. This one concerned citizen, rather than pulling out their phone and videotaping this for their 15 minutes on YouTube or Snapchatting it or something like that, took the time to call 911 and report some suspicious activity. And as a result, we likely stopped a riot from happening downtown. I think some of us were a bit surprised by not only the level of preparation that we saw, but the equipment that was carried and worn by those individuals, along with the large amount of equipment that was left in the van when the stop happened. That level of preparation is not something you see every day. It was very clear to us immediately that this was a riotous group.
All right, speaking of some of that equipment, Chief White said they found riot gear in the van, including a smoke grenade, written plans, of course, which supported their charges of conspiracy to riot. But, of course, in this day and age, Chief White also took time to address the conspiracy theorists that all popped up and that always seem to pop up after incidents like this, that this was a staged event filled with actors or even federal agents.
Let me be very, very clear. Let me be very clear here. These were not law enforcement officers that we arrested. These were members of the hate group Patriot Front. These were not Antifa in disguise, nor were they FBI members in disguise.
And of course, that hasn't stopped extremists in the state from discounting what happened or what could have happened in Coeur d'Alene. Some have asked, why were the police so well prepared to handle the situation, like they knew it was coming? Plenty of officers were on hand wearing the appropriate gear. Well, here's Chief White explaining why.
We had some information that there might be some individuals who are loosely affiliated with some of the groups who are planning to protest the Pride event that day, and so we were adequately staffed for it. Anytime you have an event like this, there's opposing groups who decide to make some threats. We were taking each of those threats, not only on its face, but also we take them seriously, even though some of them appeared to be just anonymous internet stuff. So we staffed the event appropriately.
So you heard that. Not all of it was anonymous internet stuff, as you can see. So how did we get here? That's the question. Idaho is supposed to be a state that's too great for hate, right? Not according to Idaho legislators who denied printing that phrase on an Idaho license plate a couple of years ago. So that seems like a great place to start when it comes to how did we get here. And speaking of the not so anonymous internet stuff, one of those legislators is Representative Heather Scott from Blanchard in North Idaho. Back in April, in the same speaking engagement where she was talking about alleged pornography in libraries being forced onto children, she invited 2 guys to the podium who are members of the motorcycle group known as the Panhandle Patriots Riding Club. They were there to talk about the Pride event coming up on June 11th.
So this is a group from Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, and they want a couple minutes to just share.
We are having an event the very same day. That very same day, we actually intend to go head to head with these people. A line must be drawn in the sand. Good people need to stand up. As she was talking about the repercussions, we say, damn the repercussions. Stand up, take it to the head, go to the fight. They are trying to take your children. This fight is not just paper. It's not just words, it's not just politicians. They have to see people standing in their face saying, no more.
Thank you. Where's that at? McCurran Park.
Okay, so they had plans there to be there and to take it to the head, as they said. No, they weren't necessarily inviting people to join a riot. That is true. But Representative Scott wasn't exactly diffusing the situation either, reminding them of the time and place, as you just heard. She also didn't remind people that if they weren't fans of Pride events, just don't go. Nor did she take the time to defend the Pride group's right to assemble and hold an event in a public park, only that they also must be confronted. We reached out to Representative Scott today to ask about that meeting last month in Sandpoint and what happened this weekend in Coeur d'Alene, but she didn't answer the phone, nor did she answer the text message that we sent her. But what was said by those bikers back in April pales in comparison to what was said last month by a pastor at a Boise Baptist church about how anyone associated with Pride events, specifically members of the LGBTQ+ community, how he believes the Bible tells him we should deal with them.
Let me tell you something, pal. It's your fault that these pedophiles are around. It's not God's fault. He told nations how to deal with that. He told the government of his own nation, the nation that he ruled, put them to death. Put all queers to death. They die. And you know what? When they die, that stops the pedophilia. Okay? It's a very, very simple process.
Of course, pedophilia is not the same thing as homosexuality, but that didn't matter to him. He went on to say if the system wasn't working properly, it'd be like a funnel process. We'd find out who they are, the homosexuals, we'd report them to authorities, and then they send them, apparently, to hell. That's how it's supposed to work, he says, according to Pastor Joe Jones, the real Gestapo-type stuff. We did reach out to the good pastor as well to ask him about this sermon. We've yet to hear back from him. So what happened in Coeur d'Alene this weekend? Not much of a surprise, as you can imagine. I mean, we just kind of laid out kind of the rhetoric that's been happening in this state alone just in the last couple of months, but It's been building up for a long time. The Western States Center observes, you talked to somebody today, Joe, at the Western Center that has been monitoring this across the Northwest for quite some time.
Well, and it's not just what happened over the weekend, as we just showed. This has been brewing for some time in the state of Idaho and in the Northwest. And there are national groups and international groups that study hate and bigot groups and kind of what makes them operate. Why do they do the way they do? And there's a group here in the Northwest out of Portland. They're called the Western States Center. And their job is to observe and research inclusive democratic movements and societies that are rooted in justice and equity. And a big part of that is tracking extremist groups like those that planned on harming the Pride event in Coeur d'Alene. Today, I spoke with Kate Bitts, who is a program manager at the Western States Center, and she spends her time working with communities to help them organize against white nationalism and other bigoted ideologies. And Bitts and I spoke about the events over the weekend and the implications of it all. And we started with the group at the center of this story, the Patriot Front white nationalist organization.
We had certainly been watching some of the chatter around Coeur d'Alene Pride in the Park leading up to this event for about the past month. Certainly, it was interesting that Patriot Front in particular decided to show up. This is a white nationalist group that formed following the deadly Unite the Right rally in 2017 in Charlottesville. And in order to do that, they broke off from the neo-Nazi organization Vanguard America. So one of Saturday's arrestees is Patriot Front's founder, Thomas Rousseau. He's someone who led Vanguard America members during Unite the Right, including James Alex Fields Jr., who's the young man who was convicted of murdering the anti-racist protester Heather Heyer.
Kate Bitts, a program manager with the Western States Center, says it shouldn't be a surprise that the Patriot Front group showed up in Idaho on Saturday. They have a history of doing things like this. And quick action by a citizen reporting suspicious behavior was crucial.
Definitely Patriot Front and people who work with Patriot Front do have a history of organizing actions that turn violent. I think it was a big relief to everyone to see that in this case they were quickly arrested, apparently, according to the Coeur d'Alene police, on the tip of an ordinary citizen who saw 30 guys getting into the back of that U-Haul and realized that something was very wrong. So great quick action by the community and by local law enforcement in this instance to forestall something that I don't think we quite know how it could have turned out.
When you talk about the chatter and then leading to what it did on Saturday, is this different in the work you do? Is this different to actually see people show up rather than just to see hate speech online?
Certainly we are seeing a rise in homophobia and transphobia as one of the excuses for organizing, I guess you might say, on the part of bigoted groups. And we should point out that Panhandle Patriots is not Patriot Front. These are separate groups. One is locally based, whereas Patriot Front, it very much appears that only one of those 31 arrestees was actually from our region. So yes, we have seen some escalation around Pride events this year, and partly that is because we're seeing an institutional environment. You mentioned an elected official who'd been involved in encouraging some of this mobilization. We do see an institutional environment that kind of enables and encourages this view of the LGBTQ community as somehow dangerous, instead of just people living our lives and treating our community as something of an outside influence. That's really unfortunate, and I think it's incredibly important for leaders across the political spectrum to be clear on the fact that this kind of political violence and threatening, intimidating environment is bad for everyone, not just for people who want to celebrate Pride.
When you talk about the institutional factors in the state of Idaho, in 1 week we have pride flags that are very famously placed in downtown Boise. They're ripped down and they're destroyed. You have a local pastor who basically calls for the extermination of the LGBTQ community. And then we see an out-of-state group show up in Coeur d'Alene to take on a pride festival. This is all 1 week in Idaho. In your research, what type of situation in our state is allowing this to happen where it's almost being encouraged, as we talked about, by some elected officials?
Idaho, we do see as a bellwether state. Idaho often tells us where the rest of the country may be headed in terms of how anti-democracy groups are going to try to build power, but also in terms of how effectively communities are able to push back and to blunt this kind of bigoted organizing. So, the excellent work of North Idaho Pride Alliance in putting together a really broad coalition, working with local government, with law enforcement, with civil society in North Idaho to successfully put on an event that, from everything I've heard from people in Coeur d'Alene, was fun, joyful, positive. That also shows us that Idaho is a seat of standing up to this kind of bigotry.
All right, Joe, I just have to say this. She said Idaho is a bellwether state.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say, this isn't a one-off. No. This isn't going to happen. But if we're a bellwether state, it certainly is up to us how that bell sounds from here on out.
Yeah, we're all part of it. This isn't just for people to watch play out on television. You can stand up and face hate. It's easy to speak out against something that we all know is wrong.
Thanks, Joe.